Houston, Texas, Tuesday, 8 November 1988, 11:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. The Vice President of the United States, George Herbert Walker Bush, flushed with victory, strides onto the stage of the George R. Brown Convention Center accompanied by his extended family, including his eldest son, campaign manager, and future president in his own right, George W. Bush, who was also looking rather flushed that evening, possibly for different reasons. He soaks up the plaudits of the crowd and celebrates his election as the 41st President of the United States, having just kicked the ass of his Democratic rival, Governor Michael J. Dukakis of Massachusetts, up one side of the country and down the other. Now, you may be asking at this point, Captain, you ruggedly handsome slab of throbbing masculine vigor, why are you opening the episode on the election night of 1988? Well, dear viewer, and thanks for the compliment, by the way, let me tell you why. Because that night, 32 years, 10 months, 28 days ago, was the last time the Democrats accepted the legitimacy of a presidential election that they didn't win. I know what you're thinking. Wait, that can't be right. It can't be that long ago. But oh yes, it most assuredly is. There have been 3 Republican victories in presidential contests since then. You probably need no refresher on the events of 2000, but in case there are any fresh-faced young whippersnappers in the audience tonight, that was the year in which the aforementioned George W. Bush wasn't declared the winner over his opponent, former Tennessee Senator Albert Gore Jr., whom you may know from his book and film entitled A Convenient Untruth, until over 5 weeks after the election and all manner of legal and political machinations had taken place on both sides, when finally the Supreme Court of the United States rejected a petition by the Gore campaign to order yet another manual recount in Florida, which would have been the 4th one for those keeping score at home, thus making the junior George Bush the winner of that election by a margin of 537 votes. And it was that 2000 election that really broke the brains of the Democrats. Democrats are not people who like to lose when they do political battle, and when they come up short, it can often result in decades-long episodes of severe mental and emotional derangement. They could never bring themselves to accept, or even to acknowledge the possibility that their man Al wasn't the true and rightful winner that year. And they chalked up the result to a dirty trick by a partisan Supreme Court on the grounds that the court at that time had 5 conservatives and 4 liberals on it, and it wound up being a 5-4 decision that broke down along those same lines. Now, the wounds of 2000 were still pretty fresh when President Bush ran for re-election against a former Massachusetts senator and charter member of the Narrow Birth Canal Club, or the Hit in the Face with a Shovel Club, as the case may be, who infamously introduced himself at that year's Democrat convention by snapping a salute and droning, "I'm John Kerry and I'm reporting for duty." You may also recognize this man as the guy who currently flies into your town on a private jet and lectures you about how you need to stop driving a pickup truck. The 2004 election wasn't all that close, but since the Democrats had been rendered permanently insane by the events of 4 years prior, they spent all 4 years of Bush's second term indulging increasingly fanciful conspiracy theories about how the Republicans had stolen yet another election from them. They even held congressional hearings about some supposedly rigged electronic voting machines in Ohio. Oh, you thought it was Republicans who invented rigged theories about rigged voting machines? Nope. Sorry, wasn't. So the Democrats never accepted the legitimacy of the George W. Bush presidency. They staunchly, trenchantly rejected the validity of both of his election victories, but that stuff fell by the wayside when Barack Obama prevailed in 2008 and again in 2012. But then came 2016 and a certain orange-haired gunslinger rolled into the Wild West frontier town called America, shooting from the hip, tweeting up a storm, making no apologies for his various character flaws, making not the slightest pretense to pretending to act like a politician. And the Democrats, the fake news media, and most of the Republican establishment, they all just sort of scoffed and chuckled at him. "There's no chance this guy can actually win," they said. "Look how brash and uncouth he is. And besides," said the Democrats, "we have now mastered the art of winning. We will never lose a presidential election again, and we will rule forever. First, because ruling is our birthright. And second, Because all we have to do is reassemble the Obama coalition every 4 years, and whatever candidate we give our nomination to is guaranteed to prevail. Then they all woke up on the morning of 9 November 2016 to find that Donald Trump was the president-elect of the United States. And if they could never bring themselves to tolerate 2 George W. Bush victories, you bet your sweet ass they were never going to accept having gotten their ass beat by this guy. So then we were regaled with 4 years of knee-slapping theories about Trump being a bought and paid for Russian intelligence operative, how $20,000 worth of Facebook ads, which were seen by a grand total of about 12 people, was the thing that swung the election away from the rightful winner. And all the way through from January 2017 to March 2020, as Trump wound up being a pretty good president who delivered peace and prosperity and border security and all that good stuff, we got a steady diet, not just of fake Russian collusion stories from the fake news performance artists, but we also got regularly scheduled hysterical shrieking about things like White House in crisis and walls closing in and the beginning of the end and 25th Amendment and other assorted nonsense. Let's have Jim Eagle hit the music and we'll pick this up on the flippity flip. From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where we eat dangerous misinformation for breakfast and domestic extremism for lunch. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. I am your eponymous host and humble servant. Now, I mentioned Facebook toward the end of the opening segment during our guided tour through the last 32 years of Democrat presidential election neurosis and denial, because I wanted to draw a bright line between that history of mass mental illness and this ridiculous amateur theatrical production we have seen this week with the so-called Facebook whistleblower. And no, you shouldn't be surprised that some Republicans are falling for this screamingly obvious bullshit, because some Republicans really are that stupid. I can't recall the name of the fake whistleblower lady, and I don't care enough to look it up, but you may have seen some or all of her testimony, which testimony in this case is a fun euphemism for reciting the lines that your handlers have given you to say. Anyway, she was testifying up on Capitol Hill yesterday when she gave a master class in how to speak the wokesterese language with all of the blubbering about domestic extremism and dangerous misinformation and our democracy. It was like reading through a wokesterese thesaurus, frankly. And of course, naturally, unsurprisingly, predictably as all hell, those euphemisms are all substitutes for exactly the same things. Words and ideas that the Democrats don't like. According to the fake whistleblower, the dangerous words and ideas that are circulating on Facebook, which, of course, in this case means any political sentiments that happen to fall to the right of Friedrich Engels or Pol Pot. These words and ideas are so incredibly toxic and dangerous, such a clear and present danger to our democracy, that the only conceivable remedy for correcting the problem is, drumroll please, yeah, we have to create a new federal bureaucracy to speech police the social media platforms, and Facebook in particular, because damn it, Facebook just hasn't done enough to stamp out conservative thought. And who does she promote to lead this new Ministry of Mental Hygiene? Herself. So at least she's modest and totally not very self-important at all. Now, you've probably noticed by this point, if you haven't been living under a rock for the last half-decade, that you can tell a crazed radical leftist just by the words he or she uses and the overwrought emotional delivery of the term our democracy is the biggest giveaway of them all. Because at least 150% of the time, when you hear someone blubbering about our democracy, that person hates democracy. They detest democracy. They loathe every single thing about democracy. They wish to see democracy utterly eradicated from the North American continent forever, and ideally from every other continent too. But here's the thing about democracy. Here's the thing about self-government. Here's the thing about pluralistic societies. You can't live in one, and you can't pretend to value the precepts around which pluralistic liberal democratic societies are organized unless you're willing to accept an open intellectual marketplace of competing ideas, and also willing to accept the reality that your side will sometimes lose the election. And does that sound very much like today's Democrats to you? The Democrats who have steadfastly refused to accept any presidential result that they don't like? Since back on the evening of Tuesday, 8 November 1988, 32 years, 10 months, 28 days ago? You don't need me to tell you that the Democrats, while they retain control of the White House and razor-thin majority in both houses of Congress, they're absolutely desperate during the last 13 months that remain until their monopoly comes to an end to ram through every pie-in-the-sky socialist boondoggle they can think of and to create a set of laws and policies and bureaucratic structures that make it effectively illegal for anyone to engage in forms of speech that they don't like on any platform where it might be seen by more than 2 people. That's how you can tell this is a bunch of intellectually insecure, hopeless, damnable liars we are dealing with. In poker, it's called a tell, a certain involuntary tic or idiosyncrasy by which a player's opponents can tell how good or bad the cards are that they're holding. Because people who are secure in the correctness of their worldview, in the truthfulness of their ideas, in the defensibility of their opinions, those people don't try to systematically silence their ideological opponents. They don't go up to Capitol Hill and demand that the federal government take immediate action to scrub the internet of contrarian views. People who genuinely believe they are right act in the exact opposite way. People who are secure in the moral and factual rectitude of their worldview think their opponents should be given as big a platform as possible. As the popular metaphor goes, sunlight is the best disinfectant. And no, YouTube, that's not an anti-vaccine statement, so please don't yank this video down. Bad ideas should be given as wide a hearing as possible so that people can see why they are bad ideas, so they can comment on all the various ways in which the idea is bad, because an open, lively, vibrant, no-holds-barred debate is what we are supposed to do in a pluralistic, liberal, democratic society, and may the best ideas win. But that's the absolute last thing that our friends over on the left want, and it betrays the knowledge somewhere deep down in the still sane recesses of their fevered psyches that they know the ideas in which they traffic and the policies they seek to impose on you and me and everyone else are not intellectually defensible, do not stand up to basic scrutiny, and cannot survive in an open marketplace of ideas. And so they go whining and crying to the federal government, saying, "Please, Mr. Government, silence my enemies because it's too much work trying to defend my bullshit worldview, and the mean people always wind up laughing at me because everything I say is so spectacularly wrong and incoherent." And because that's not a very convincing argument for top-down government censorship, they start vomiting out the standard set of wokesterese, euphemisms, and platitudes. Domestic extremism, our democracy, dangerous misinformation, and so on, because they are nothing but a bunch of insecure weaklings and cowards and mental toddlers who want mommy to intervene and rig the game so they can never lose. And if I'm being honest, my favorite hilarious overreaction in this broad brush world of stamping out speech on the grounds of dangerous misinformation is the fact that not long ago, YouTube actually banned flat earth videos. And I don't know about you, but I am still racking my brain trying to figure out how it can be harmful if some idiot actually rejects scientific knowledge that's been well understood by everyone with a functioning prefrontal cortex since ancient Greece, since the days of Archimedes and Anaxagoras. Now, how exactly is it dangerous to believe in a flat earth? Someone might refuse to go on a ship that's circumnavigating the globe because they're afraid of falling off the edge? And what's more, I don't know about you, but I've never been fully convinced that the flat earthers were actually serious. I always saw those videos as hilarious comedy. I thought they were great. I used to watch them all the time. I would laugh until I got freaking stomach cramps. And if the people who were making that stuff really believe it, that just makes it funnier. So where the hell is the danger? Does YouTube think its viewers are so stultifyingly dumb that they'll be taken in by a concept that can be defeated simply by asking one of its proponents the question, if the world is flat, why is there a horizon? There you go. Bad idea defeated in 10 words or less. But by censoring the idea, by declaring it dangerous misinformation, don't you just imbue it with more credibility than it could ever warrant? Because I'm pretty sure the average 6-year-old can tell you why the Earth isn't flat. Anyone who's smart enough to remember how to breathe can tell you why the world isn't flat. So thanks, YouTube, for keeping your viewers safe from ideas that can't withstand the intellectual scrutiny of a first grader. Thank you for pulling down some of the funniest, most entertaining videos on your entire platform, because I, for one, sure feel safer now. But here's the thing. The big tech oligarchs who really run our country, who are so powerful they can install someone in the presidency, just like the railroad and steel and oil tycoons installed William McKinley in 1896, they really do think you're that stupid. Their contempt for your intelligence is impossible to overstate. These are people who view unwanted ideas as a communicable disease that can be transmitted as easily as a Chinese flu virus that your tax dollars helped to engineer and weaponize. Allegedly. If we let people watch flat earth videos, they might believe the world is flat, says your self-appointed intellectual babysitter. Did it ever occur to YouTube that flat earth videos get massively high numbers of views because normal people enjoy things that are ironically hilarious? I bet it probably didn't. Because they view themselves as the elect and the elite. They view people like me and you, people who lack fancy degrees from prestigious universities, as rubes and simpletons who have to be kept safe from our own stupidity. And the legacy news media? Well, they at least have enough self-awareness that when they occasionally pull their heads out of their asses, they can see which way the wind blows and who the hell butters their bread. So they are happy to march to the beat of whatever song the big tech oligarch band decides to strike up. Wait, what's that, sir? You want to install a senile former mediocre senator from Delaware, possibly the dullest, most unexceptional national political figure of the last 50 years, as the next president? Well, yes, sir. Right away, sir. You see, for most of the 20th century, the legacy news media made its money by being the only game in town. You either listened to their radio stations, read their newspapers, watched their TV networks, or you went without information. Then, in the second half of the 1990s, the internet happened, and the legacy media types saw nothing in their future but a swift trip down the toilet drain to utter irrelevance. But then, around 10 years ago, when social media began to take hold, they started to see a potential pathway to survival. They could no longer make a profit by selling physical newspapers and playing commercials to a captive audience of radio listeners and TV viewers. But if they went to where the eyeballs are now, and if they agreed to only ever promulgate content that comports with the political worldview of the 21st century's industrial tycoons, if they transitioned from being a news product to an entertainment product, but still pretended to be news, in the same sense that WrestleMania is a sporting competition, then that might be an actual pathway forward, where our industry doesn't need to die. It just needs to become a fake news sludge factory whose lack of journalistic rigor would make William Randolph Hearst blush in shame. But I guess journalism is overrated anyway. Who's got time for journalism when there is money to be made? But even still, that business model only works to its utmost when you're the only game in town. So we have seen, slowly at first, but with increasing speed, a transition of all the social media platforms and of YouTube from being a venue of individual independent creators and commentators to a venue where if you come looking for news and political analysis, they want you to only see establishment-approved content from legacy media outlets. How many times have you been watching a video from an independent creator on YouTube, and the next thing you see in your autoplay queue is some bullshit Seth Meyers or Jimmy Kimmel or Stephen Colbert or NBC News video? Go take a look down there right now. It'll probably be there. Even if you've clicked the button 100 times that says, stop showing me this content, because I know I've clicked that button 100 times, and those assholes still show up in my queue every single time, even though I would rather saw off my own testicles with a box cutter than watch anything from the legacy news media or the people we used to call late-night comedians. Oh, and also, in case you didn't get the memo yet, the Department of Justice is going to declare you a domestic terrorist. If you go to your local school board and tell the wild-eyed Marxist revolutionaries who are in charge of your child's education that you don't think it's okay making kids wear ridiculous masks all day long, that you don't particularly like hardcore porn novels being assigned as young adult literature, and you strongly object to race hatred and segregation being the twin cornerstones of the academic curriculum. Because these are not your kids. These are the government's kids. And don't you ever forget it, buddy, unless you want an FBI SWAT team breaking down your door at 5 a.m. in the name of social justice. Because they will come after your ass even quicker than if you had tied a piece of string to a garage door in Alabama. Thanks for watching. Have a pleasant tomorrow. See you Friday. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.